Welcome back. We resume with a developing story in Central Africa. Now, earlier today, Rwanda closed its border with the DRC. Now it's reopened that border. It followed the death of a person who had been confirmed to be suffering from Ebola in that town. Goma is the largest city in the Eastern DRC on the border with Rwanda. The United Nations World Health Organization says the outbreak is now the second deadliest in history. The SABC's Michael Baleke reports from Kampala.
The Democratic Republic of Congo says the move by Rwanda goes against the recommendations by the UN World Health Organization to keep borders open. But the Kigali government denies the claims. Rwanda says no such decision has been taken to close the border, adding that the interruption is for technical reasons. There is cause for concern linked to the recent case in Goma, the largest city in the DRC, populated by millions of people near the Rwanda border. The outbreak in the DRC, now in its second year, has killed close to 1,800 people, and the World Health Organization has declared it a public health emergency. DR Congo's neighbors like Uganda have stepped up efforts to prevent the virus from crossing over the border through vaccinations of frontline health workers and screening everyone entering the country. Michael Baleke, SABC News, Kampala.
For the latest, we now go live to Kinshasa in the DRC. Chris Okamaringa is our correspondent there. Chris, good evening to you. Do we know why Rwanda has now reopened this border after closing it earlier today?
Well, the government says that, it respects the decision of the World Health Organization. After this outbreak in the DRC was declared a public health emergency of international concern in mid-last month, the WHO asked countries, to keep all their trade routes open and not to restrict any travel because it would negatively affect the DRC's economy. And so the Rwandan government says, they're respecting the recommendation of World Health Organization. Although earlier, there was a contradiction. One of the ministers in Rwanda said the borders had been closed, and then another health minister said that the borders have been open all along. The huge traffic at the border point was because of the extra screening that they were carrying out. And so they're just trying to, go along with the international community's recommendation on how they should deal with this outbreak in the DRC.
Goma is one of the biggest travel hubs in that part of Africa. How important is this crossing point with Rwanda?
Well, hundreds of people, do cross over to Rwanda every day doing business. The eastern part of the DRC, not just Goma, but the larger eastern part of DRC relies heavily on goods from Rwanda and Uganda. And those goods pass through, the border in Gisenyi, which is just next to Rwanda. And so if that border is closed, then that means the livelihoods of very many people who rely on petty trade, what they call petit commerce in French, will be, badly affected. And so it's a very, very strategic town. It's a very important area, and it's also very complicated for health workers to track people who have come into contact with Ebola patients because people are always traveling. It's not like the remote areas where it's easier to track people and vaccinate them. So Goma presents a very difficult situation for healthcare workers. That is why the DRC government says they have stepped up surveillance. They have put in place hand washing stations, and they're generally working with the World Health Organization to ensure that this disease does not spread around the region and the world.
This outbreak of Ebola has now been going on for over a year. It seems to have been very difficult to stop it and very difficult to stop Ebola from spreading. What kind of resources are there? Are there enough resources from the United Nations and from the governments of Rwanda and the DRC to make sure it doesn't spread any further?
Well, the resources haven't been enough. The World Health Organization recently, appealed to the international community, to redouble its efforts to bring in more money because everything that they're doing requires lots of money. The World Bank recently announced $300 million for the outbreak, but that's just about half of what they need. There have been other countries like the United States, Norway, and many other members of the international community who have pledged to bring in money, and the World Health Organization and the DRC government just hopes that they make good on their promise so that they can start carrying out a range of activities aimed at bringing this outbreak to an end. So far, there have been more than 1,800 people who have died ever since this outbreak was first reported in August last year. And so health authorities have now come with a strategy to strengthen the response to the outbreak over the next 6 months so that they bring it to an end.
Relations between Rwanda and the DRC have been quite difficult in the past. How's the DRC been responding to all of this? Is this adding to some of the tensions that we've seen in the past between these two countries?
Well, that's right. There was a lot of tension between DRC and Rwanda in the past. In 1996, the Rwandan government sent in troops. They were backed by Uganda to bring in the president, a rebel leader, the then Laurent Desire Kabila, the father of former President Joseph Kabila. And from then on, the relationship, soured, and there were always these conflicts in the east. But you see, when the DRC had a new president last year, Felix Tshisekedi, things changed. Tshisekedi made visits to Rwanda where he met his counterpart, Paul Kagame, and they discussed a lot of issues. Security was one of them, on how they can strengthen, the borders, the border security, so that rebels from Rwanda do not enter, and also so that they can arrest all these militants who have been wreaking havoc in the DRC. And so the relationship has changed. And they are hoping that this is the start of, a much better, harmonious way of doing things between the two countries. And the DRC government has also urged the president of East African Community, Paul Kagame, to join the East African Community so that they can also do trade, because they believe if we have a stronger partnership with Rwanda and other countries in the East, then all these wars, will be brought to an end. And so there's really hope that things are going to change now.
Our SABC correspondent, thank you very much indeed, Chris Okamringa, there live for you from Kampala.